Here's an interesting fact to think about. In almost any city you can name, a sliver of street segments accounts for a big share of the crime. Not whole neighborhoods, street segments. One block runs high for years, while the block right behind it stays quiet. And figuring out why is a big part of this course. Welcome to the Spatial Exchange, a podcast designed to complement our crime mapping class at Drexel. In class, we'll walk through the slides, the GIS tools, and of course the maps, step by step. In these podcast episodes, however, we'll explore some of the deeper GIS concepts and implications, the why behind the what. Let's start with the idea that anchors everything. Place matters. When we map crime, we're really doing two different jobs. The first one is to describe. A map tells you what you're seeing and where it is. The second, the harder one to explain, is why you're seeing it. Anybody can dress up a map, but a crime analyst looks at points and clusters and asks, what do these events have in common? And the answer over and over comes back to the features of the place itself. Who's around, what's built there, and what happens on that corner at 2 p.m. versus 2 a.m. So when we see a crime cluster, we need to resist the easy story that it's just about the people who live there. Concentrated crime tends to sit on top of concentrated disadvantage. Fewer jobs, weaker institutions, less investment. The map isn't only showing where enforcement should go, it's showing where the housing, the schools, and the healthcare never arrived. That's an ethical problem, not just an analytical one. None of this is new. People have been mapping crime for 200 years. Back in the 1820s and 30s, Adolphe Quetelet in Belgium and André Michel Guerry in France started shading maps by region to show where crime was heavy and where it was light. They called it moral statistics, and they were already connecting crime to poverty and literacy. No computers, just data and shaded maps, which we now call choropleth maps. Fast forward to early 20th century Chicago, where Shaw and McKay used choropleth maps to show the spatial distribution of juvenile delinquency. But they conducted a lengthy study, finding that the same neighborhoods stayed high crime decade after decade, even as entirely different immigrant groups moved through them. The people changed, the pattern didn't. The place continued to exert its effects on crime. Then computing catches up. Police start sticking pins in maps in the 70s and 80s, and by the 1990s, the NYPD builds CompStat, institutionalizing the idea that you manage crime by watching geographic data closely and acting on it. That's the lineage you, as a crime mapping student, are stepping into. So how do analysts explain the clustering? Three theories tell most of our story, and we'll be going back to them throughout this course. The first is routine activities. A crime needs three things in the same place at the same time: a motivated offender, a suitable target, and the absence of anyone capable of stopping it. Take away any leg of that triangle and the crime tends not to happen. The second is crime pattern theory. People move through the city along predictable paths between predictable nodes: home, work, school, the grocery store. And certain places pull activity toward them, like a subway station or a bar. Where those everyday paths cross the right conditions, opportunity concentrates. Crime pattern theory is the layered version of routine activities, showing how different features of the built environment pull people toward them in predictable ways to create opportunities for crime. Third is the social disorganization theory, which zooms out to the neighborhood. When social and economic ties break down, informal control weakens and crime finds more room. Same theme as everything else today: structure, place, opportunity. But crime data are only partly a measure of what people have done. They're also a measure of where the criminal justice system focuses its attention. If a neighborhood gets heavily policed, it generates more reported crime because there's more opportunity to get caught, which justifies more policing. That's a feedback loop, and AI systems trained on crime history can send officers back to the same communities regardless of what's actually happening there. Layer on CCTV cameras, license plate readers, and body cams, and you've got enormous surveillance power with real privacy costs, often driven by proprietary algorithms that nobody outside the vendor can inspect. None of that means the tools are bad. It means they're powerful, and power without transparency tends to deepen the very inequalities that we started with. The same map that says send police here also says this is a neighborhood where investments never occurred. A good analyst reads that map both ways. So that's your foundation. Crime clusters because place shapes opportunity. We've been mapping that for 2 centuries, and modern GIS lets us do it with amazing precision. When you're in class placing those points on the maps and shading those hotspots, keep asking the second question. Not just what am I seeing, but why and who's affected by the answer. That question, more than any tool, is what will make you a crime analyst. This has been the Spatial Exchange. Go make some maps and think hard about what they mean.